this postnatal depression is, I didn't suffer it. I was so lucky. But I remember when I had my first child, and again, things have changed over time. It's understood now, and it wasn't then. And there was a girl, and it must have been, she had the baby born on the same day as I did. And the next day, she was sitting in this room, and I think it was where I did all the bottles and everything, and she was absolutely sobbing. Now, I understood baby blues and everything to just be kind of like a depression like this, and like just quiet and all sort of internal feelings and everything. She was really, really crying.
Well,
and
I did that when my baby was just 3 days old, and it came with the milk, almost like the tears. And I remember the midwife who delivered the baby coming to see how I was. And I said, I'm really happy, but I can't stop crying. I'm sorry.
But
and I knew I was fine, and it was just like a real rush of hormones.
But did you
something
feel
really weird.
suicidal? Because I mean, it gets
all,
so
no.
bad,
I
doesn't
think
it,
that's
with
a
some
different
people?
thing. I think the
Do
crying
you?
that comes with the milk is like a one-day thing, and it's not at all the same as postnatal depression, which is like a rush of hormones. And I was lucky I didn't suffer postnatal depression. But after that experience, I was frightened I would get postnatal depression, so I was so determined to have a lovely time. I invited all my friends around to see the baby, and I didn't get postnatal depression at all. I had
But
a
you
really
might
nice
have
time,
been in a
but-
vicious circle, because you'd have been exhausted with all your friends and just like,
I'm so depressed.
yes, exactly. When you're tired, it brings you down. Oh my goodness me!
That's right. There's a difference between baby blues, that thing immediately afterwards, isn't there?
Yeah,
when your
I
body
think so.
physically is in shock, more or less, isn't it?
You're right, and I think it's documented that it's day 3 that you'll have that tidal wave, and I had the same thing. I remember sitting in hospital and just overwhelmed with tears and with a strange sadness that was a bit confusing, because it was, I'm really, I wanted this baby. She's here, that's great, but, something was something was controlling me inside, and that released everything. But I think the postnatal depression thing, I mean, I really believe it exists, and I wonder if it happens because we put so much pressure on ourselves, and going back to work early.
I do wonder if it happened in like Victorian Edwardian days. Did they have that sort of problem?
It can't be a new thing.
Exactly, because hormones are going to behave in exactly the same way. So
didn't they give them 6 weeks called laying in the olden days, and they more or less treated the woman like a mad woman? I read this somewhere, or it was on Radio 4 or something.
that's when they were considered a little bit mad.
It was called a laying-in period, and it was for 6 weeks. The women sort of weren't allowed to go out and see anybody and just stay at home with the baby and be dead quiet, because we know you're going to be a bit weird. So I think it's been recognised for years.
I think it's such a good idea.
back,
Well, it's going back to that thing about sort of 2 weeks. My mother was in hospital for 2 weeks after each baby. You do need that time to adjust without the pressure. Otherwise, you get no escape from the real world. It's like one day you're motherless, if you like, and then suddenly the next day you've got a baby, and yet the whole world hasn't changed around you, and it's too much, isn't it? You need to adjust to it.
I agree, and I mean, I think I was one of these women that just pushed myself straight back into, or after 6 months of being with the baby. But when I was with the baby, I was painting rooms and assembling furniture and working freelance and digging garden beds.
Thing, all part of the nesting.
I think it was crazy woman. I need to feel like I'm achieving something here, and as awful as it sounds, I didn't, I didn't give what I was doing with my daughter enough, kudos, really. I wasn't achieving anything there. It was awful.
Yeah, but it's so invisible, though.
yourself.
Everybody says that. Women are embarrassed to sort of say, "Oh, I'm a housewife." It's like
it's not true. And I think that pressure to do stuff is really sort of accentuating the postnatal depression that's happening, or it's encouraging it, because we're just not taking that time to, as you said, Rachel, which I loved. I wanted to enjoy my baby, and no one, that's not a big thing anymore. It's kind of like, I want to have my baby, and I want to get back, and I want to do this, and all of that overwhelming commitment and responsibility with deprivation, with hormones, with a bit of scary, maybe financial pressure, or partners changing. I think it's the combination of all of those things. That's
I was all right. I feel like the one
in fact, I thought you would be even worse, because you've had 2, so your hormones are going to be even doubly neurotic.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it was just because I was too busy with having 2 of them. When they were born, one of them had to go into special care because her lungs weren't developed, because they were born 5 weeks prem. And I perhaps it's because I had one to look after and one constantly on my mind. And the only time I cried was when she was poorly. And I don't think it was postnatal depression or baby blues.
Yes,
I think it was because I was worried.
Yes.
So I don't actually remember really worrying too much. I think I just thought, fantastic, I've got these babies, I'm going to get on with my life now.
You wanted them very much, and I think older, you know, I was 35 when I had my babies, and I was just grateful I'd had babies, you know, because you get all these reports about once you're 35, your fertility declines. And I was just like, so pleased, I've got a baby. Yeah. Maybe it's younger mothers who get postnatal depression.
I don't know. I was 24, right, well, the very next day I was 25, but I like to think I was 24, because technically I was. So I suppose I would be considered a young mum. And I didn't with any of the children. That's not strictly speaking true. With the third one, I think I did, but it wasn't a depression so much. I was so angry, funnily enough. So I suppose that's a form of depression. I was so angry with Chris. And I remember thinking, he's doing nothing and everything. He said, well, I haven't changed. And I went, that is actually the point. You haven't adapted to this thing. I am worn out. This is now my third child. And I'm dealing with all these things. Plus I had 2 stepchildren. And so that was, again, I mean, like you were sort of saying, you would have felt exactly the same way. It wasn't postnatal depression when your daughter went into what was it called?
SCBU, special care baby.
Oh, yes, yeah. So I think it was that. I would have felt like that anyway.
Well, it's funny. I remember sitting at a dinner party with some friends, and I think my daughter was 4 months old, and I was sitting next to my best male friend, and they'd had a baby 6 months before us, and I sort of really quietly, you know, sort of said, isn't it hard? Like, aren't you tired? Are you finding it as much of a struggle as I am? And he just looked at me with this strange, you know, blank expression on his face and said, I don't know what you're talking about. My life hasn't changed. I still go out to work, and I just come.
Men, and it's not fair.
And here was I in this turmoil of, am I depressed? Am I unhappy that I've got this child because I'm not coping with all of the, you know, all the things that are going on? And he just looked at me and said, but I just go to work, and the difference is I come home to 2 people at the end of the day, not one, and I love it. And I thought,
but did you ask her though? Did you get to ask her?
No, I didn't, because her whole thing was, I want to have babies and I want to be at home, and she would never have said.
She wouldn't have ever admitted to feeling strange.
No, because I think this was her life's work. But that's also,
don't you think that's a danger as well? This is why the depression comes on. It's like, if you admit to feeling low, or not perhaps feeling as happy as you thought you might be when the baby comes. Or feeling tired. Then you're suppressing a real feeling. And that's all going to factor into the fact that you're getting depressed and low.
I think a lot of women feel lonely as well, because suddenly, although you've got the baby, you're responsible for it, and you can't just go out and do stuff because the baby's asleep and you have to stay there. And I think some women possibly feel like they're the only ones it's happening to, and they don't know.
I think that's why it's really good, the baby groups that they have, because I joined an NCT baby group and I loved it. And I have to say, because I had worked for years and years, ever since I was 18, I absolutely adored those coffee mornings with the other mums and all showing off our babies, and I thought it was great, you know.
There's
and
a lot
I think
of people out there though that don't join these kind of groups because they don't know anyone there.
And it's the imagery. I have to say, it's like school coffee mornings and parents sort of like thingies, and you just think, oh God, it's going to be so dull, and all we're going to talk about is my child's grade or my child's this, that and the other. It's not promoted in the right way.
But there are other mothers like yourselves who've become mothers, and I found my group really interesting. They'd all had great jobs and careers beforehand and then had babies, and I didn't find them dull mornings at all. I used to love it, and I used to think, oh, this is nicer than going to work.
You have to discover that by going. And I think a lot of people think, oh God, that's going to be dull, so they don't even go in the first place to discover it. But it's so
important to get out and talk to other people before that.
Because otherwise you're on your own.
Yeah, well, it's like a problem shared, isn't it?
Exactly.
No, I'm not on, you know, this is quite normal.
Yeah. Actually, that's a point, because I think if more people spoke about how, you know, whether they are struggling, as we'd said before, or you know, sleep deprived or whatever, if we spoke about it, people can help, and maybe that would help with these incidences of postnatal depression happening more often. Because I know, for one, I didn't want to talk because I thought I should be handling this.
I know, exactly. That's it. You suppress it. Yeah. But you know, they're not giving you enough help in the hospitals. And I mean, honestly, this does really so date it. There weren't disposable nappies when Dex was born. Actually, that's not strictly speaking, there were, but they were so expensive. So it was the terry towels and the pads and everything. I didn't even know how to do one. They hadn't even shown me. I remember trying to do it, going bloop, 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 and then the pitman picked him up to sort of cuddle him, and they just all fell off. And there's not enough. They don't teach you and they don't guide you. And how can you possibly learn in 24 hours from having a baby?
Like breastfeeding. But that's another subject. I tried breastfeeding 2 at the same time. That's fun.
We'll leave that to you, Cheryl.